The AI model battle is heating up. And the big question that everyone is asking us, and it seems to be asking each other, is what is the best AI model? Are we still rocking with GPT-4o, or has Anthropic's Claude kind of taken the cake? They have a bunch of different pros and cons. Anthropic been a maniac of dropping new features lately, which we'll cover some of that stuff, a whole bunch of interesting things. And people are also starting to build really interesting projects on top of these AI models as well. So all sorts of interesting things going on. Connor, what have you been seeing in the space as far as, comparing these two models?
This is AI applied, folks. If you have not tried Claude or you're not using Claude every once in a while testing it, please, this podcast is for you. We are telling you the AI that you should be applying to your life is Claude 3.5 Sonnet is free. It's a smaller model than Opus. Now, listen, I still pay for my model. It's $20 a month. Same with ChatGPT, just because it gives me more queries and everything else. But I use them for different things. But more and more, Claude is just shining, and I'm starting to feel behind when I'm reading what everybody else is doing. Claude has these things called artifacts, which we've already covered, and it's almost impossible to categorize it. But essentially, if you can imagine, you have your sort of normal large language model interface. Now, even in my normal way of doing things, I use a Claude project, which is essentially like a custom GPT, which is when you make your own little ChatGPT version, and then you upload your own documents and write from there. So, for example, I have my newsletter writer. Now, as a writer, I like to write my own newsletters, but what this is amazing at is formatting it into such a way that it creates like almost a step-by-step model for me and all that kind of stuff. And then it creates that almost as an artifact. But I want to give a huge shout out to the people who are really leading the charge in my mind. One is our friend, Ali K. Miller. You can find her because she has, 1.5 million followers all over the place. You can find her on Twitter, LinkedIn, everywhere else. I feel like Ali is leading the charge with finding these artifacts. Another one is Ethan Mollick. So if you go to like an Ali post, she's talking about making data visualization and creating interactive dashboards. I've seen people make like Flappy Bird, making a usable soundboard. They're coding up games. Literally, you have to understand what this feels like, people. You go on there and you literally just say, code me a game like, or something simple, and it'll write out the code, and then it'll create the game. It's unbelievable. And then this morning, I think it was just this morning, I can't remember, Ethan Mollick, who's also just absolutely leading the charge on all this, had an amazing little thing where he said on LinkedIn, and I'm not quoting because I don't have it in front of me, but I remember him saying, listen, people should just be trying this because it's fun. And the example that he gave, and Ethan Mollick's a national treasure, he was like, Claude, create me a calculator, like a working calculator. But he didn't say that. He said, create me the smurfiest Smurfy calculator that's ever existed in Smurfdom. And if you know that inside reference, if you've ever watched the Smurfs, they say Smurf for everything. And this calculator that it created, all the buttons were Smurf, all the answers were Smurfity Smurf. And then he did another one saying, I just got back from my pirate voyage. I need to count on my doubloons. And Claude's like, oh, me hearty, it sounds like you're... And it created this pirate calculator. Point being that there's a lot of fun things you can do, but it's almost only limited by your own imagination at this point. So I am putting Claude in the driver's seat. Jaden, how are you using these models?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. My go-to, but maybe more out of habit right now, is still ChatGPT.
Yeah.
It can do a lot of interesting things. They with their image generator kind of built in, and they got a lot of stuff built in, and document uploads built in, and I got the app on my phone. So I get that side of it, but I am more and more looking at a lot of these really interesting use cases out of Claude and Anthropic, and being super, super impressed with them. And then in addition, because of this whole code thing, a lot of the developers on our team over at AIBox are really excited about Claude and a lot of the stuff that Anthropic is doing. And there's also people making like independent projects based out of these tools, because as these tools are kind of getting better and focusing more on, like, for example, Anthropic's Claude with coding, a lot of our developers are like using it for a lot of their development needs, or I don't know, kind of helping them with code. But people also making really cool projects. So a big shout out to Pietro, who, it's at Scarano on X. But he just introduced something called Engineer 2.0. This is a GitHub So obviously it ties into Anthropic's Claude, but he's got a bunch of cool stuff on the side. Essentially what this is it is an engineer with agents. So he just did a big update with essentially code execution agents and a bunch of dynamic editing. So when you are editing a file, specifically like bigger ones, the engineer is going to direct a coding agent, and the agent is going to give changes in batches. A lot of times when you're changing stuff in your code base, it's not just changing in one place, you're changing it all over the place. So it can do these kind of these batch changes. They're selected based on file complexity. And the code execution agent can also run the code, and it can also check the code for issues. It can even start processes. So it could spin up a live server, and it can end a live server. This is super powerful, but I just feel like as these AI models get really good at like certain areas, people just kind of dive in and build more tools on top of that, specifically focused on these areas. So I'm really excited about a lot of the development capabilities that Anthropic's Claude is bringing forward. But yeah, overall, really, really interesting stuff coming out of Anthropic's Claude right now.
It really is, and Pietro, he and I were out in Google I/O together, and we were examining some of the new Google stuff together. The stuff that he's doing is amazing. Go follow him as well. It's funny. I almost feel like I need people telling me how to use artifacts. I was literally asking Ali K. Miller this question the other day. We were both in the New York area, and I was like, I'm just not. The artifacts to me look almost like playful. Like I wouldn't use them for anything. She's like, oh, no. You got to get into that because they're so unbelievably helpful. And the way that I think about it a lot is, being at NYU Stern, we have a lot of entrepreneurs, obviously. And it's just this incredible way to create this minimal viable product. And, in the past, if you'd wanted to code something up, I have no coding experience whatsoever. I wouldn't know the first thing about coding. And so in the past, you have to go find somebody that knows how to code or can do something basic or something like that. And now you have this free tool on your laptop that you can say, hey, code this up and let me know what this would look like. Where are the glitches? Where do you see this going? What does this look like if you just do this? I've created little models when I've been trying to explain how AI differs from ML, differs from large language models, differs from generative AI, just sort of like, concentric circles. And it'll just create that for me. It's different from image generation. Now, obviously, it doesn't have connection to the internet, but it does have vision and everything else. So I still use ChatGPT kind of like you out of just everyday habit. It's my Google search. It's just, this is where I go. This is what I ask. I don't go into Claude to ask anything else. But if I'm doing work product, I haven't gotten enough into artifacts, but watching what other people are doing, especially with interactive dashboards and everything else, it's amazing. So when you think about your workflow, Jayden, I mean, I'm just wondering with something like AI Box and you have Podcast Studio and everything else, where are you seeing, at least even for the future of your team and everything, which kind of products do you guys think you'll be using?
Yeah, I think OpenAI is not going anywhere, and it feels like generally it's better at a lot of things. But then, then again, there's these other AI models that are specifically good at certain things, and you don't want to miss out on that, because why would you use ChatGPT to try to write the tone of an email when Anthropic's Claude is just so much better at tone? And so I kind of go back and forth. Recently I was using ChatGPT for it was summarizing an article for me so I could understand something that was happening really quick, and I threw it into Anthropic's Claude and into ChatGPT, and I did notice the result I got out of Claude tone was so much better. It sounded so much more natural. It sounded like that I could share or say, and I'd be a human, and ChatGPT obviously was kind of robotic. But what I did notice was ChatGPT, and I'm sure I could, adjust this with prompting, but just in a kind of a one-shot prompt, it was adding a little bit more detail. It was a little bit more detail-oriented. It had a couple interesting little insights that weren't in the Anthropic Claude one. So there, it's like pros and cons of both sides, but I definitely think, and you can probably get it to do a lot of these things like altered with the prompt, but yeah, they both have different use cases, and I think people should be using both. I think you should see
100%
and get the benefit out of using both.
I think that the no-brainer, low-hanging fruit is if you're mimicking voice or something like that, Claude is just better. It's just more natural sounding. ChatGPT is connected to the internet. ChatGPT, guys, there's nothing wrong with ChatGPT. I love it. I use it way more than Claude. But I guess the last thing on this, Jayden, I was thinking is, I think that even though to me right now artifacts are more interesting than anything else. It's sort of like video generation. It's like, yeah, it's cool, but what are you actually using it for? Whereas I think AI image generation itself is already super useful. I think video generation maybe not so much. I kind of feel like that with artifacts. Again, Ali K. Miller would vehemently disagree. There's a lot of people really using artifacts and doing these interactive things and all that kind of stuff. The one thing I just want to point out, a little peek into the future, is that I was doing a little research for a LinkedIn post around OpenAI's 5 stages of or 5 steps to AGI, which you and I have talked about in our previous episode. And here's the thing, Jaden, I put this on LinkedIn. I was about to post on that, but the more interesting thing that came out of it was I just looked it up on Google to sort of see what article I could link. And the 5th article, even above Tom's guide and everything else, was a Perplexity page. That was at the top of the Google result. And it's just reminding me that if you haven't used Perplexity pages, I don't really use them, but it's a nice way to get information and then format it really nicely to send it on to somebody or something like that. But some of these are getting so big that now they're showing up in search results already and this 5 steps of AGI only came out a few days ago, and already it's sort of all the way up the Google algorithm to like number 2 or 3. So I think that maybe with artifacts, we're going to start seeing that too. All these things are going to start working their way into our daily life more and more. You're not even going to notice it.
Amazing. Yeah, this is fascinating stuff. Listen, if you enjoyed our latest up-to-date analysis of Claude versus GPT, we would enjoy your latest up-to-date analysis of the podcast via a review. So if you wouldn't mind, take a couple seconds and leave us a review over on Apple or on Spotify. You got to hit the About tab on Spotify, and then you can drop some stars. We really appreciate it. We read all the reviews. We love all the reviews. We do it for you guys because you are amazing. So we appreciate you all, and I hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day.